A man rarely admits how much of his energy is spent waiting for approval, a glance of respect, a word of praise, a silent confirmation that he matters. When validation becomes necessary, decisions begin to bend, speech loses weight, and posture follows opinion instead of conviction. The discomfort you feel around this truth is not weakness. It is recognition. Something in you already suspects that dependence has a cost few men calculate until it is paid. Lesson 1. The first truth is that men who need validation are already defeated because authority has already left their hands before any visible loss occurs. Defeat does not begin when a man fails. It begins when he waits, waiting for agreement, waiting for recognition, waiting for permission to feel certain about what he already knows. Validation seems harmless because it arrives dressed as connection, cooperation, even humility, but beneath it sits a quiet transfer of power. The moment another person becomes responsible for confirming your worth, your direction no longer belongs entirely to you. Watch how decisions change under observation. A man alone often knows exactly what must be done. He speaks clearly. He moves directly. Yet place him inside a room where approval matters and hesitation appears. Words soften, opinions adjust, laughter becomes louder than necessary, disagreement becomes dangerous. He calls this diplomacy. Time calls it surrender. History has already tested this pattern. The crowd rarely needs to silence a man who has learned to silence himself. Why does validation carry such weight? Because rejection feels like exposure. It suggests exclusion, and exclusion once meant danger. The body remembers older environments where belonging ensured survival, but modern life rarely threatens survival in this way. The threat now is psychological. A look of disapproval in a meeting, silence after a message, a comment ignored online, small moments, yet they reshape behavior with remarkable efficiency. The man begins editing himself before anyone asks him to. Consider the workplace. A man notices an error in a project. He understands the consequences of remaining silent. Still, he calculates reactions. Will speaking create tension? Will others see him as difficult? He delays. Someone else speaks later and receives credit. He tells himself timing was unfortunate. The truth is simpler. Approval mattered more than accuracy. Validation turned competence into negotiation. The same mechanism appears in relationships. A man senses disrespect but avoids confrontation because harmony feels safer than clarity. He laughs at remarks that diminish him. He tolerates boundaries being crossed because disagreement risks withdrawal of affection. Over time, resentment replaces presence. He wonders why attraction fades, unaware that dependence quietly replaced respect. People rarely trust the judgment of someone who abandons it first. Noise rewards performance. Social platforms amplify this lesson daily. Opinions shaped for applause travel further than convictions shaped by thought. A man begins measuring ideas through reactions instead of truth. Numbers replace standards. Silence becomes frightening because silence offers no confirmation. Yet silence reveals something uncomfortable. If no one applauds, who are you still willing to be? One sentence remains enough here. Validation trades certainty for comfort. Defeat is subtle at first. Nothing dramatic collapses. Income continues. Conversations continue. Life appears functional. But inside, direction weakens. Energy scatters toward managing impressions instead of building substance. Anxiety grows because approval is unstable currency. What pleased yesterday disappoints tomorrow. The man works harder yet feels smaller because dependence always demands maintenance. Ask yourself quietly, how many decisions this week were shaped by fear of being misunderstood? How many opinions remained unspoken because agreement felt safer? The cost accumulates invisibly. not through punishment, but through erosion. Authority fades one compromise at a time, until even solitude feels unfamiliar. Lesson 2. The second truth is that validation turns strength into negotiation long before a man realizes he has begun bargaining with himself. Men who need validation are already defeated because every decision becomes conditional, not based on what is right, not based on what is necessary, based on how it will be received. A man may still appear confident. He may speak loudly, dress sharply, even lead conversations, but inside, he measures reactions constantly, adjusting tone and posture to avoid disapproval. Strength loses direction when it must constantly ask permission to exist. Negotiation is useful when discussing contracts or solving conflict. It becomes destructive when applied to identity. A man who negotiates his principles slowly forgets where they originally stood. At first, he makes small adjustments. He avoids a disagreement to keep peace at work. He laughs at a joke he dislikes because silence feels awkward. He accepts a responsibility he knows he should refuse because saying no might disappoint someone important. Each moment seems minor. Each compromise feels temporary. Yet, repetition creates a habit stronger than intention. Observe how this shapes speech. Instead of saying what he means, he begins anticipating objections before they arrive. Sentences grow longer. Exclamations replace clarity. He explains excessively, hoping understanding will protect him from rejection. The listener senses uncertainty even when the argument is correct. Words lose gravity when they seek approval more than truth. Noise increases while authority disappears. Modern environments reward this behavior. Meetings filled with agreement appear efficient. Social groups celebrate harmony. Online spaces punish friction instantly. A man learns that disagreement carries social cost, so he refines the art of appearing aligned. He calls this maturity. Time calls it dilution. The strongest positions in history rarely emerged from consensus. They emerged from individuals willing to tolerate discomfort long enough to remain honest. Consider friendship. A man stays silent when conversations drift toward values he does not share. He fears appearing difficult. And months later, he feels disconnected from the same people he tried to please. Nothing dramatic happened. No argument exploded. Distance simply appeared. Negotiation replaced authenticity, and connection built on performance rarely survives exposure. People instinctively sense when someone is presenting a version designed for acceptance. In romantic life, the cost becomes sharper. Attraction depends on presence, not compliance. A man who constantly adjusts himself becomes predictable. He agrees too quickly. He apologizes before conflict even forms. He abandons preferences to avoid tension. What begins as kindness slowly reads as uncertainty. Respect fades quietly because certainty signals stability. Approval-seeking signals dependence. One sentence must remain clear. Negotiated conviction is borrowed strength. Add base. Even ambition suffers under validation. Creative work becomes shaped by expected reaction rather than internal standard. The writer edits ideas before finishing them. The entrepreneur abandons projects after early criticism. The artist studies trends instead of studying craft. Productivity remains busy yet hollow because direction changes with every voice loud enough to interrupt concentration. Effort multiplies while meaning diminishes. Ask yourself where negotiation has replaced decision. When did hesitation become normal? When did explaining yourself feel safer than standing still? Validation convinces a man he is being cooperative, adaptable, socially intelligent. In reality, he is exhausting himself, maintaining approval that never stabilizes. Every room becomes a mirror, demanding adjustment. Every interaction becomes a test he never agreed to take. And slowly, without announcement, the man forgets what he would have chosen if no one were watching. Lesson 3. The third truth is that beneath the need for validation sits fear, not weakness in the dramatic sense, but a quiet fear of standing alone with one's own judgment. Men who need validation are already defeated because fear has already negotiated the terms of their behavior. Not fear of danger, fear of exclusion, fear of misunderstanding, fear of being seen without agreement. These fears rarely announce themselves openly. They disguise themselves as politeness, flexibility, or emotional intelligence. Yet their effect is unmistakable. A man begins avoiding clarity because clarity risks resistance. Fear changes perception before it changes action. A neutral expression becomes imagined disapproval. Silence in a conversation feels like rejection. A delayed reply becomes evidence of failure. The mind starts filling gaps with threat because approval has become necessary for emotional stability. When approval stabilizes mood, uncertainty feels unbearable. The man checks reactions repeatedly, searching for reassurance, the way others check weather forecasts before leaving home. This is why validation rarely feels optional once dependence forms. It becomes regulation. Praise calms anxiety. Agreement restores energy. Attention provides temporary certainty. Without these signals, the internal voice grows louder, asking questions the man has avoided answering. Am I respected? Am I enough? Did I make the right choice? Instead of confronting uncertainty directly, he searches for others to silence it. External confirmation replaces internal examination. Consider leadership. A man promoted into responsibility often discovers how uncomfortable decision-making truly is. Every choice risks criticism. Every direction excludes alternatives. Some begin consulting endlessly, not for wisdom, but for protection. If everyone agrees, blame feels diluted. Meetings expand. Opinions multiply. Action slows. He believes collaboration strengthens outcomes. Often, it only distributes accountability, so he never stands alone. Authority becomes a shared illusion rather than a personal burden carried deliberately. Relationships expose this fear even more clearly. A man hesitates to express dissatisfaction because disagreement might trigger distance. He studies tone carefully, choosing words designed to avoid reaction. Over time, conversations become careful performances instead of honest exchanges. Conflict disappears temporarily, but intimacy fades with it. Trust requires exposure. Without exposure, connection becomes polite distance, maintained by mutual avoidance. Modern culture amplifies fear through constant observation. Every opinion may be recorded, shared, judged instantly. A man learns early that mistakes travel faster than corrections. So he edits himself before speaking. Safety replaces sincerity. He begins believing invisibility is wisdom, yet invisibility slowly erases presence. Others cannot respect a position they never encounter. One sentence deserves permanence. Fear asks for witnesses before it allows action. Rejection plays a central role here. Many men fear rejection more than failure itself. Failure can be analyzed privately. Rejection occurs publicly. It carries faces, reactions, consequences. But rejection also exposes dependence. The man who collapses under disapproval discovers how much of his stability relied on agreement. The man who remains steady learns something else entirely. Discomfort passes faster than imagined. Look at moments where fear quietly intervened. The business idea never proposed, the boundary never spoken, the opportunity avoided because uncertainty felt humiliating. None of these required dramatic courage. Only acceptance that misunderstanding is inevitable. Time has proven that clarity attracts resistance before it attracts respect. Validation promises safety from resistance. The price is direction. And so fear continues its work silently, encouraging hesitation disguised as caution, compromise disguised as kindness, delay disguised as preparation, until a man notices that years have passed filled with acceptable decisions but very few chosen ones. Lesson 4. The fourth truth is that most men confuse respect with approval, and this confusion quietly ensures defeat long before consequences become visible. Men who need validation are already defeated because approval feels warm, while respect often feels cold. Approval smiles quickly. Respect observes first. Approval rewards comfort. Respect measures consistency. When a man begins chasing the easier signal, he unknowingly abandons the one that actually sustains authority. Approval depends on agreement. Respect depends on reliability. These are not the same currency. A man can be widely liked and quietly dismissed at the same time. People enjoy his presence because he reduces friction. He adapts easily. He avoids confrontation. Conversations remain pleasant around him. Yet, when serious decisions arise, others turn elsewhere. They do not fully trust a man who adjusts himself to maintain harmony. Adaptability without boundaries reads as uncertainty. Consider the workplace again. The agreeable employee receives praise often. He helps everyone. He rarely refuses requests. Managers describe him as cooperative. Still, promotions pass him by. Why? End. Because leadership requires discomfort, difficult conversations, unpopular decisions, the willingness to disappoint someone in order to protect something larger. Approval-seeking behavior signals hesitation under pressure. Reliability fades when acceptance becomes necessary. The misunderstanding deepens in friendships. Many men believe loyalty means never challenging those close to them. They avoid honest disagreement because tension feels like betrayal. Over time, resentment accumulates silently. Conversations lose depth. Advice becomes diluted. Encouragement instead of truth. When difficulty finally appears, trust feels shallow because honesty was sacrificed long before conflict arrived. Approval maintained peace. Respect required courage that never appeared. Romantic relationships reveal the distinction with precision. Attraction rarely grows from constant agreement. A man who abandons preferences to avoid tension slowly removes the structure others rely upon emotionally. He becomes pleasant but predictable, accommodating but unclear. Approval maintains comfort for a while. Respect sustains desire because it signals stability. Stability requires visible standards. Without standards, kindness feels negotiable rather than grounded. Modern culture amplifies approval because visibility rewards it instantly. Online reactions measure popularity in real time. Agreement spreads faster than complexity. Nuanced thought risks misunderstanding. A man learns quickly which opinions gather applause. He adjusts tone accordingly. Eventually, he forgets whether the opinion belongs to him or to the audience observing him. Performance replaces conviction while appearing socially successful. One sentence must remain fixed here. Approval invites you closer. Respect allows you to stay. Respect grows slowly because it survives disappointment. Someone watches how a man responds when challenged. Does he collapse into defensiveness? Does he rush to repair discomfort through apology, even when unnecessary? Or does he remain calm, listening without surrendering direction? Authority is rarely loud in these moments. It is steady. History has already tested this pattern. People trust the man who can tolerate temporary tension without abandoning himself. Ask quietly how often agreement has replaced honesty. How often silence protected comfort instead of truth. Approval feels like connection because it removes friction immediately. respect often introduces friction first. The man seeking validation avoids that friction instinctively, unaware that avoidance slowly erodes the very standing he hoped approval would secure. And when approval inevitably fades, he discovers too late that nothing durable replaced it. Lesson 5. The fifth truth is that many modern environments train men to perform instead of stand firm. And performance quietly replaces character when validation becomes necessary. Men who need validation are already defeated because performance depends on observation. It requires an audience. Without witnesses, it loses meaning. Standing firm requires none. It survives whether anyone notices or not. The difference appears small at first, yet it shapes how a man moves through every room he enters. Performance begins as adaptation. A young man learns quickly which traits receive approval. Confidence, when confident people are admired. Humor, when humor earns acceptance. Sensitivity, when vulnerability becomes fashionable. None of these qualities are wrong. The danger emerges when they stop being chosen and start being worn like uniforms. Identity becomes adjustable clothing selected according to environment. He calls this versatility. Over time, it becomes absence. Social environments reward this adjustment relentlessly. Meetings favor enthusiasm over precision. Networks reward visibility over competence. Conversations celebrate expression more than restraint. A man notices that strong reactions generate attention. Calm observation rarely trends. Slowly, he learns to amplify gestures, exaggerate certainty, display emotion strategically. He does not notice when sincerity begins competing with effectiveness. Performance feels productive because it produces response. Consider professional ambition. A man spends more time appearing engaged than becoming capable. He attends every conversation, responds immediately to messages, ensures his presence remains visible. Meanwhile, deeper work requires solitude and long periods without recognition. Silence feels dangerous because silence produces no applause, so he remains active rather than effective. Years later, exhaustion arrives without mastery. Movement replaced development. Relationships suffer underperformance as well. A man studies what others expect emotionally and delivers accordingly. He becomes attentive when attention is praised, expressive when expression is rewarded. Yet moments of fatigue expose the strain. Maintaining roles requires energy. When stress removes the ability to perform, confusion appears on both sides. People realize they never met the unedited version of him. He realizes he barely knows it either. Digital culture intensifies this pressure. Every action invites reaction. A photograph, an opinion, a success shared publicly generates immediate measurement. Approval becomes numerical. Silence becomes visible absence. The man begins living slightly ahead of himself, anticipating how moments will appear rather than how they will feel. Experience becomes material for perception management. He documents before understanding. He reacts before reflecting. One sentence must remain clear. Performance seeks witnesses. Character survives without them. Standing firm often looks unimpressive from the outside. A man declines invitations that distract from work. He refuses conversations that trade honesty for comfort. He allows misunderstanding to exist rather than rushing to correct every perception. Others may interpret restraint as distance. Some call it arrogance. Yet over time, something changes. Consistency forms gravity. People learn where he stands because it does not shift with atmosphere. Noise invites participation constantly. Opinions circulate faster than thought. Pressure appears, disguised as opportunity. Join this conversation. Respond now. Clarify your position immediately. Performance thrives in urgency because urgency prevents reflection. The man seeking validation responds quickly to avoid absence. The man building authority allows silence to exist long enough for intention to catch up with reaction. Ask yourself where effort has been spent maintaining image instead of substance. How many choices were shaped by visibility rather than necessity? Performance promises belonging through adaptation. Standing firm risks isolation first, but isolation often reveals something uncomfortable and liberating at the same time. Without an audience, decisions finally return to the only place they ever truly belonged. Lesson 6. The sixth truth is that silence is the first resistance available to a man who refuses defeat. Men who need validation are already defeated because they cannot tolerate silence. Silence removes feedback. It removes reassurance. It removes the constant signals that confirm acceptance. Without reaction, uncertainty appears. Many rush to fill that space immediately, speaking more, explaining more, revealing more than necessary. They mistake expression for strength, when often it is only discomfort escaping containment. Silence unsettles people because it interrupts expectation. In conversation, most anticipate immediate response, agreement, defense, justification. A man who pauses changes the rhythm entirely. Others begin revealing themselves while waiting for his reaction. Information appears without effort. Emotion exposes itself without interrogation. Silence is not withdrawal. It is observation without surrendering position. History has already tested this pattern. Those who speak last often understand more. Validation-seeking behavior fears misunderstanding more than error. A remark lands awkwardly, and the man rushes to repair perception. He adds explanations. He softens tone. He clarifies intentions repeatedly. Each addition reduces weight. Words multiplied rarely strengthen meaning. They signal anxiety about reception. Silence, however, allows misunderstanding to exist temporarily. That tolerance communicates stability. Not everything requires correction. Not every opinion deserves entry into personal space. Consider conflict. Someone raises their voice, expecting escalation. Emotion demands participation. Many men respond immediately because silence feels like weakness. Yet reaction often grants control to the loudest person in the room. A pause interrupts momentum. The other person must confront their own intensity without opposition feeding it. Calm presence reveals contrast. Noise becomes visible when it stands alone. Authority does not compete with volume. It allows volume to exhaust itself. Professional environments reveal the same mechanism. Meetings reward constant contribution. Speaking frequently signals engagement. Stillness risks invisibility. Yet the man who listens longer notices patterns others miss. Contradictions appear. Motivations surface. And when he finally speaks, fewer words carry more consequence because they arrive measured. Silence accumulates credibility when it precedes clarity. Digital spaces make silence even harder. Messages arrive instantly. Notifications invite response without delay. Absence becomes noticeable. Some fear being forgotten if they do not answer immediately. They explain delays, justify priorities, apologize for boundaries never questioned. Validation quietly demands availability. The man who resists learns something uncomfortable. Most urgency disappears when ignored long enough. Not everything deserves interruption. One sentence belongs here. Silence is not absence. It is selection. Relationships also change under silence. A partner tests boundaries through tone or frustration. Immediate reaction invites escalation. A calm pause forces both sides to reconsider direction. Silence does not mean avoidance. It means refusing emotional manipulation disguised as urgency. Words chosen after reflection protect dignity better than those thrown in defense. Many misunderstand silence as passivity. True silence requires discipline because the impulse to react remains strong. The body wants resolution. The mind wants certainty restored quickly. Remaining still while misunderstanding exists demands confidence that truth does not require constant advertisement. Over time, others recognize this steadiness. They learn that pressure does not accelerate response. Respect forms around predictability. Ask quietly how often speech has been used to escape discomfort rather than express conviction. How many explanations were offered before anyone requested them? Validation depends on reaction because reaction proves existence. Silence removes that proof temporarily. And in that temporary absence, a man discovers whether his direction survives without witnesses long enough to become his own again. Lesson 7. The seventh truth is that rejection exposes dependence more honestly than failure ever could. Men who need validation are already defeated because rejection removes the illusion that approval was earned through merit. Failure can be explained away. Circumstances were difficult. Timing was wrong. Resources were limited. Rejection offers no such comfort. It arrives without negotiation and asks a simple question a man cannot avoid. Who are you when agreement disappears? Most men fear rejection because it feels personal. A proposal refused, a message unanswered, an idea dismissed publicly. The mind translates these moments into judgment about identity rather than evaluation of circumstance. Validation, dependency, strengthens this reaction. If approval regulates confidence, rejection destabilizes it immediately. Mood falls. Direction hesitates. Energy drains. Not because opportunity ended, but because external confirmation vanished. Consider ambition. A man presents a project, believing effort guarantees acceptance. When criticism arrives, he interprets resistance as proof of inadequacy. He withdraws quietly, convincing himself refinement is necessary before trying again. Months pass. The idea remains unfinished. Failure would have offered information. Rejection offered discomfort, and discomfort convinced him retreat was wisdom. Many abandoned paths were not blocked by incompetence. They were abandoned to avoid exposure. Rejection also reveals how much identity relies on perception. In social settings, a man tells stories designed to impress. Laughter reassures him he belongs. One evening, the response changes. Interest fades. Attention shifts elsewhere. Suddenly, words feel heavier. Confidence weakens. Nothing essential changed except reaction. The dependence becomes visible. Approval had been functioning as emotional scaffolding, holding posture upright. Relationships sharpen this lesson further. Romantic rejection carries unique weight because affection feels intimate. A man offers attention, expecting reciprocity. When distance appears instead, he questions value rather than compatibility. He replays conversations, searching for mistakes. He edits personality afterward, hoping adjustment will prevent repetition. Adaptation seems logical, yet repeated adaptation erodes authenticity until attraction becomes impossible to sustain. Desire rarely grows towards someone negotiating themselves constantly. Modern environments intensify rejection through visibility. A public comment ignored receives silent judgment from imagined observers. A business proposal declined travels through professional networks quickly. Digital silence feels louder than spoken refusal. Some respond by avoiding risk entirely. They remain agreeable, neutral, invisible. Safety replaces growth. Ironically, invisibility becomes the deepest rejection a man can impose upon himself. One sentence must remain here. Rejection removes the audience and reveals the actor. Those who endure rejection without collapse discover something unexpected. The discomfort peaks quickly, embarrassment fades, conversations continue, life moves forward with remarkable indifference. The imagined catastrophe rarely materializes. Time has proven that resistance often precedes recognition. Many ideas dismissed early become obvious later. Many boundaries resisted initially become respected afterward. Ask quietly which decisions have been avoided to prevent refusal. The conversation never started. The opportunity never pursued. The standard never enforced. Validation dependency convinces a man that acceptance must exist before action. Reality works differently. Action invites rejection first. Respect arrives later, sometimes quietly, sometimes never publicly acknowledged at all. And so, rejection stands as an uncomfortable teacher. It removes applause. It removes reassurance. It removes the illusion that safety lies in agreement. What remains afterward is not comfort, but something heavier and more honest, waiting to see whether a man continues walking when no one confirms he should. Lesson 8. The eighth truth is that discipline erodes quietly when identity depends on applause. Men who need validation are already defeated because discipline requires consistency in the absence of recognition. Applause interrupts that process. It rewards moments instead of habits. It encourages performance peaks rather than steady construction. When approval becomes necessary, effort begins following attention instead of purpose. Discipline is rarely dramatic. Most of it happens where no one watches. Early mornings without announcement. Work repeated long after enthusiasm disappears. Decisions maintained when convenience argues otherwise. Validation disrupts this rhythm because it teaches the mind to associate effort with reaction. If praise follows progress, motivation rises. When silence follows the same effort, doubt appears. The man begins questioning whether the work matters at all. Observe how quickly behavior adjusts under observation. A man exercises consistently for months alone. Results grow slowly, but reliably. Then recognition appears. Compliments arrive. 8298. Suddenly, intensity increases, not for improvement, but for continuation of praise. When attention fades, so does momentum. The habit was no longer anchored internally. It had attached itself to reaction. Without witnesses, discipline felt unnecessary. Professional life offers similar examples. A worker produces careful work when supervisors are present. Deadlines accelerate performance. Visibility sharpens focus. Yet, alone, standards soften. Distractions multiply. He tells himself pressure improves productivity. In truth, dependence formed pressure. External monitoring replaced internal expectation. Authority shifted outward, again unnoticed. Creative work suffers even more under applause. Writers begin measuring ideas by reception rather than honesty. Musicians repeat formulas that previously succeeded. Entrepreneurs chase trends validated publicly instead of solving problems quietly. The fear of losing approval becomes stronger than the desire to explore uncertainty. Innovation fades because experimentation risks criticism. Applause rewards repetition efficiently. Digital environments amplify this erosion relentlessly. Numbers appear instantly. Views, reactions, comments. Each becomes a signal interpreted as worth. Silence after effort feels like failure, even when progress exists privately. A man refreshes screens, searching for reassurance. Concentration fractures into fragments of anticipation. Deep work requires long stretches without interruption. Validation culture trains the opposite rhythm. One sentence belongs here. Applause shortens endurance. Relationships reveal another layer. A man behaves generously when appreciation follows. Gratitude motivates kindness. Yet, when appreciation becomes routine or absent, resentment grows. he feels unseen. Effort slows. The original intention dissolves because it relied on response. True discipline continues even when acknowledgement disappears, not from sacrifice, but from alignment with chosen standards. Time has proven something uncomfortable. Many successful outcomes were built during periods when nobody noticed progress at all. Foundations are rarely celebrated while being laid. Recognition arrives after structure already exists. Those dependent on applause abandon construction midway because silence feels like rejection rather than incubation. Ask quietly how often motivation has risen and fallen with attention, which routines weaken when no one observes them, which commitments survive only when appreciation remains visible. Validation promises energy through encouragement. Discipline demands energy through decision. One fluctuates constantly. The other accumulates quietly. A man eventually faces a choice rarely announced openly: continue working when effort feels invisible, or redirect effort toward environments that guarantee reaction. One path builds substance slowly. The other maintains stimulation quickly. Both feel productive in the moment. Only one survives when attention inevitably turns elsewhere and silence returns without explanation. Lesson 9. The ninth truth is that detachment is not coldness. It is the recovery of internal authority. Men who need validation are already defeated because attachment to approval turns every environment into a negotiation for emotional stability. Detachment removes that negotiation, not by rejecting people, but by refusing to outsource direction. Many misunderstand detachment as distance or indifference. In reality, it is precision. It decides what deserves influence and what does not. Attachment to approval creates constant monitoring. A man enters a room already adjusting posture to anticipated reactions. He listens not only to words, but to tone, searching for signs of acceptance. Conversations become evaluations instead of exchanges. Energy drains quickly because attention splits between presence and perception management. Detachment simplifies awareness. He listens to understand, not to measure himself through response. This change appears subtle from the outside. He speaks less urgently. He does not rush to fill silence. Praise does not accelerate him. Criticism does not immediately slow him. Others sometimes interpret this as emotional distance. In truth, emotional reactions still exist. They simply no longer dictate direction. Time has proven that stability attracts trust more reliably than enthusiasm controlled by approval. Consider professional pressure. Feedback arrives sharply during a project review. One man defends himself immediately, explaining intentions, protecting image. Another listens quietly, separating useful information from emotional tone. Detachment allows selection. Not every opinion deserves entry into decision-making. Without it, every voice becomes equal, regardless of competence or intention. Authority dissolves under excessive openness. Relationships often challenge detachment most intensely. Affection invites vulnerability. Expectations appear naturally, yet dependence grows when mood begins following another person's approval cycle. A compliment elevates the day. A distant message ruins it. Emotional weather changes hourly according to response. Detachment does not remove care. It removes volatility. Connection becomes chosen rather than required for stability. Modern culture resists detachment because engagement drives participation. Immediate reactions keep conversations alive. Outrage spreads faster than reflection. The man who pauses before responding appears slow in environments addicted to speed, yet speed often conceals confusion. Detachment creates space between stimulus and action. Inside that space, judgment returns. Without it, reaction becomes habit. One sentence must remain here. Detachment protects direction without rejecting connection. Rejection loses much of its power under detachment, not because disappointment disappears, but because identity no longer rests entirely on acceptance. A declined opportunity informs adjustment rather than self-doubt. A disagreement becomes information instead of threat. Energy, once spent managing impressions, returns to construction. Focus deepens because fewer voices compete internally. Some fear detachment will isolate them. The opposite often occurs. People sense reliability in someone not constantly negotiating emotional ground. Conversations become clearer, boundaries easier to understand. Trust grows because responses remain consistent regardless of atmosphere. Validation dependency produces unpredictability disguised as kindness. Detachment produces steadiness, sometimes mistaken for severity. Ask quietly which opinions currently occupy more space than they deserve, which reactions linger long after usefulness expired. Validation invites every voice inside without inspection. Detachment closes the door gently, not in anger, but in recognition that direction weakens when too many hands attempt to hold the compass at once. And in that quieter room, decisions begin sounding different when they finally belong to one mind again. Lesson 10. The 10th truth is that everything changes the moment a man no longer asks to be seen. Men who need validation are already defeated because visibility becomes their currency. They measure existence through recognition. When attention fades, certainty fades with it. But when a man stops asking to be noticed, something unexpected happens. Energy returns, not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly, like weight removed from shoulders he forgot he was carrying. Seeking to be seen shapes behavior more than most admit. A man chooses words hoping they will be remembered. He shares achievements before they mature. He explains intentions before results exist. Even restraint can become performance when done for admiration. Attention begins directing effort. The audience becomes an invisible partner in every decision. Approval whispers constantly, "Will this be understood? Will this be admired? Will this confirm who I want others to believe I am?" The cost appears slowly. Privacy disappears first. Thoughts, once examined carefully, become announced prematurely. Projects lose strength because exposure replaces incubation. Opinions harden too quickly because retreat would look inconsistent publicly. The man becomes trapped, maintaining an image created during moments of uncertainty. Growth requires revision. Performance punishes it. Consider ambition again. Many men exhaust themselves announcing progress rather than completing it. Plans discussed repeatedly feel productive because reaction simulates accomplishment. Encouragement arrives early. Expectations follow. When difficulty inevitably appears, abandoning the path feels humiliating because witnesses exist. So he continues reluctantly or stops entirely to avoid embarrassment. Visibility controlled the direction from the beginning. Relationships also shift when the need to be seen disappears. Conversations become quieter. Listening replaces proving. He no longer competes for understanding through explanation. Presence replaces persuasion. Others notice something difficult to describe. There is less urgency in him, less need to correct every misunderstanding. Some interpret this as mystery. In truth, it is simplicity. Identity no longer depends on constant confirmation. Modern life resists invisibility fiercely. Platforms reward exposure instantly. Silence suggests irrelevance. Absence risks being forgotten. Many men fear that stepping back means losing opportunity. Yet, constant visibility invites constant comparison. Comparison breeds restlessness. Detachment from recognition interrupts that cycle. Work deepens because attention returns to process rather than perception. One sentence must remain here. The man who stops asking to be seen begins seeing clearly. Criticism changes under this condition as well. Without the need for admiration, insults lose leverage. Praise loses intoxication. Both become information rather than nourishment. Emotional stability strengthens because reaction no longer determines identity. Decisions sharpen. Boundaries clarify. Some relationships fall away because they depended on performance. Others strengthen because authenticity replaces negotiation. Time has proven that many of the strongest men worked longest in obscurity, not as strategy, but as necessity. Substance grows slowly. Roots deepen where applause cannot reach. Recognition sometimes arrives afterward, sometimes never publicly at all. Yet the work stands regardless because it was never built on observation. Ask quietly, what would remain if no one noticed your effort for a year? Which commitments would continue? Which ambitions would survive without applause? Validation promises visibility as proof of existence. Reality offers something heavier: direction chosen without witnesses, effort maintained without reassurance, a life shaped not by reaction, but by decision carried forward long after the room grows silent. If this message met you at the right moment, don't let it disappear into noise. Subscribe to Austere Mind and return to what demands discipline instead of distraction. No excess, no performance, only thoughts built to endure.